Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. I hope you're having a great day in Jesus. We're going to look a little bit at Old Testament violence and how do you explain Old Testament violence. This is where there's so many like this, like Marcion, but so many others. They're like, the God of the Old Testament can't be the same God of the New Testament. You know, like Robert Brent Graves' wonderful book, The God of Two Testaments, the Jehovah of the Old Testaments, the Jesus of the New Testament. For now, I think it's still in print by Pentecostal Publishing. But a lot of people say, you know, Old Testament God bad, New Testament God good, full of grace. I'm thinking, have you ever read the Gospels? Somebody just made a cogent observation. I think it was on maybe American Vision or something. I can't remember. Gary DeMar, which I don't agree with him eschatologically, but he's really good in a lot of ways. But he was writing about Jesus just almost on every page of the New Testament. He's offending somebody, saying something offensive, and as only God in the flesh could do. And so, so this is a big thing with atheism, what used to be called the radical atheist, four horsemen of the radical atheism and all this, that they would look and say, okay, and I've read this even on HuffPost. Somebody was like, how could God, okay, if you're supposed to be pro-life, how did God drown so many pregnant women, killed a bunch of babies in the flood, for example? Well, first of all, we're not sure that, you know, the world may have been so corrupt, there may not have been much in the way of reproduction. But even if there was, because I know like the book of Jasher, which I really don't trust at all, but, you know, says there was abortifacients and all this at that time, that in a biblical worldview, those babies before the age of accountability go to heaven. So actually it's the mercies of God, rather than being raised in a corrupt society with a high probability or almost certainty of going to hell, then God gave them all a free trip to heaven. So you can go that route. The same with Sodom and Gomorrah. Where it gets even more tricky is where God used his people as instruments of judgment in Canaan. And I think that's exactly how you have to look at that. That God could have chosen judgment like the flood, like Sodom and Gomorrah, like hailstones raining down from heaven, like a wall falling on 20 some odd thousand at one time, as he did in the Bible. But just as he used the Romans as a source of judgment in the siege of Jerusalem and all of this for the rejection of Messiah, that he, and I don't want to get into all that, that he used his people as an instrument of judgment in Canaan. Because again, people, they really get like with the pro-life thing, they're like, it says rip up a woman with child. Again, rather than being raised in paganism, being raised with no hope of heaven, then they actually get a free trip to heaven. I know there's pushback, 1 Corinthians 7, that then were your children unsaved, now they're holy and unclean. I forget the exact phraseology there in 1 Corinthians 7, but now are they holy, on and on. Some people say it's saved people, their children go to heaven, but unsaved people, their children still go to hell, on and on. Some people think they're reborn in the new earth and all that. That's just, in my understanding, that's just speculation. That's speculative. I don't see any understanding of that in Scripture. If there is, please throw the Scripture out there. I would be, because I certainly don't know everything there is to know. I would love to learn about that, but I've never seen that in my dozens of trips through the Scripture. So, explaining violence in the Old Testament, especially when you've got Jesus talking about peace. Thomas Jefferson's like, okay, I don't believe in the miracles, but the teachings, pray for your enemies, do good to those that despitefully use you, and do violence to no man, resist not evil, on and on. Just a lot of various things which you have to take in context, because there's other places, submit to God, resist the devil, he'll flee. And but you do have to look at it in that respect. Now, some people would say, well, what about the capital punishment, like for idolatry, for children that are rebellious and those type things? Well, you know, as you read and compare, and I've got several of this on Biblical Archaeology Today of ancient law codes, the Bible is superior. that to the ancient law codes. And there is orderly society, and to have an orderly society, to be able to leave your doors unlocked at night, to be able to have transactions between people, there have to be punishments for wrongdoing. And so we would say God knows best, that he is the divine mind and he knows what is right. So that's how you explain all the violence in the Old Testament. There's a lot of, there's a New Testament is just full of higher standards, because too much is given, much is required. We got a new birth, new covenant. That's what the term New Testament is. So, but it's the same God. It's not Old Testament God bad, New Testament God good. Love you. God bless. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.